Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Dawkins on the big questions: is the Bible still relevant today? Here's the interesting thing about this video. This video includes an expert Hebrew Bible scholar, Francesca Stavrakopoulou, and I'm telling you, I've read her book. It's an amazing book that deals with the anthropomorphic depiction of God in the Old Testament. God has a body, hands, feet, nose, eyes, head. You know, he's a masculine man. And of course, he has a massive ding-a-ling, okay? I don't know which description I wanted to give. Ding-a-ling, schlong, the whole nine, you know, all those different terms. And she highlights that in her book. So if there's somebody who knows Hebrew Bible quite well, I would go to Francesca and say, she knows a thing or two. So Richard Dawkins and Francesca are in this episode together. I hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel, check the bell, like the video, share this thing out, join the community. Now let's react. Let's see what happens. Thank you so much for the recommendations, and this recommended video was one of them.
King James Bible was written to be understood by every subject in his realm. And over the past 400 years, Christians found justification in its text to depose kings, to free slaves, to chastise the rich, to empower the poor, but also to burn witches and to stone adulterers. But is the Bible still relevant today? Well, Francesca, as somebody who's studied it again and again, back to front, is it fact? Is anything in there historical fact?
Very little, probably. I think one important thing to bear in mind is that ancient writers had a very different understanding of what fact or fiction was from us today. It wasn't written to be a factual account of the past. I don't think that's the way in which these biblical writers understood the past. But as a historian of the Bible, I think there's very little that's factual.
King David?
No.
Moses?
No.
Dude, look at the audience. Like, you know how many people were probably like, oh, snap. Controversial. I mean, everybody's face, except for a few, are probably not moved by it because they're like, you sinner.
Somebody said Jesus behind me. I don't think they were taking the Lord's name in vain.
No, Jesus, most scholars would agree that he existed, yeah.
So a hodgepodge of writings by different writers, scribes at different times with different agendas.
Absolutely, and a hodgepodge is like not doing it a great service. I mean, it's a very sophisticated collection of ancient literature. I mean, it's fantastic stuff. It really is. Lots of different genres, lots of different sorts of traditions that are being adopted and adapted and then readapted by successive writers. These were very creative people that were producing these texts. It's brilliant stuff.
But the sum of it, was it put together somewhat arbitrarily? That's the point I mean by hodgepodge over the years, for a purpose. I mean, the books that are there, why those books? Why not other books? Very few of the biblical books were written to be included in a Bible. Yeah. That's quite a late idea, late from my perspective as a historian. So they weren't necessarily written to be included in a Bible. These are religious writings. Some of them got into the Bible, some of them didn't, as we know. The choices that were made as to what should be contained in this collection, I mean, it's very hard to say. Some things were obviously more appropriate, the collectors felt, than others. Bishop Michael.
Yes, I mean, I agree with Francesca that there are many different genres in the Bible. There's obviously poetry in the Bible, there are proverbs, but there's also history. I mean, take, for instance, the sudden appearance in archaeological evidence of the rather crude dwellings of the Israelites superimposed on the rather sophisticated dwellings of the Canaanites. The sudden disappearance of the cults that Francesca is so interested in, of Asherah and Baal. Why did these things happen? Because something historical had happened. Another people had come into the land and supplanted those who had already been there. Well, that's historical.
So I'm hoping Francesca slaps this dude back, because Israel literally adopted these things. It's not like they came in and kicked those things out. No. They practiced these very things he's trying to condemn. I don't think this guy knows what he's talking about.
Archaeologically, it's very difficult to tell a Canaanite from an Israelite.
Well, archaeologically, I'm just pointing out the differences, the crude housing that the Israelites, as former nomadic people, had used, the fact that these cultic shrines suddenly stopped being built. I mean, something was happening, and we have to give an account of what was happening.
But if most of it...
I'm sure that if it was just him and her, she would point out the cultic practices and the cultic statues and, of course, belief in Asherah doesn't happen till much later. These people that come into the land and start to unite under what we like to call Israel, which it was not a unified kingdom, I don't think. I think these were... one may have had power that actually somehow was able to tell the Southern Kingdom what to do. They were a superpower compared to the Southern Kingdom. But at the end of the day, they're still practicing all these things, all the way down into the Babylonian exile. So I'd like an archaeologist, not a guy wearing the cloth, you know what I mean? A religious dude standing there trying to tell us what it is. Who's your archaeologist? Who's your guy? Because I've talked to several, and they have differing opinions as well on how to interpret some of this data.
Didn't happen. Why should we pay
But it did
most
happen,
of
you see.
Noah's Ark?
Well, I'm talking about what happened in Canaan.
Oh, I'm sure you are. You don't want to go to Noah's Ark and be like, nah, that didn't happen.
I'm not saying that everything in the Bible is historical, because clearly it isn't. I mean, there's saga, there's poetry, there are proverbs, there is wisdom.
Francesca's probably thinking, God, dude, I got to deal with this,
But there is also material that is historical. I mean, the writing prophets, for instance, bear witness to contemporary events that were happening all around them. Now, you may have a different interpretation of those events. Their enemies at that time certainly did. And quite a lot of what we know about
That's true.
Israel, actually, we know from their enemies. What the conquering kings and those passing through the armies, what they tell us. Their accounts may be different, but they're witnessing to the same sorts of peoples and events that were going on. I think this kind of radical skepticism is unwarranted.
Radical skepticism.
Yeah, I get that quite a lot.
I bet you do, yeah.
I think...
You deserve to get it, yes.
But I think it's important to point out that what you might perceive as radical skepticism actually is all about debates that we've been having in academia for a long time. I'm not...
Which academia? Albright, John Bright, G.E. Wright?
Well,
which academia are we talking? Kathleen Kenyon?
A long time. Well,
Dude, shut the up, dude. Let her talk.
Well, that doesn't make that work
very...
irrelevant. I mean, being dead doesn't make academics...
Dude, shut up and let her talk. You literally aren't letting her speak.
Irrelevant.
It does make it outdated in terms of the ways in which academia engages with other branches and other disciplines, which help us to understand...
This is just sensationalism. I mean, most mainstream archaeology would accept that there is a historical basis to what there is of history in the Bible. As I say, not everything in the Bible is history.
I didn't say there was no history.
Well, you said hardly any facts.
I said hardly any facts, exactly. I think the point remains is that, of course, there are some things in the Bible that broadly happened. The exile of the people to Babylon.
Dude, he literally won't let her talk. You know what I mean? He keeps talking over her.
But
how generous.
But just, and equally, just as you said, there's a lot that isn't fact.
But even you say that you say
in fact, the Psalms are about somebody's emotional and religious state. The Proverbs are about wisdom. I mean, there are different sorts of the Song of Solomon
that Professor Dawkins likes. How do you know whether to read something as history or something as not history in the Bible?
Well, the Book of Kings or the Chronicles or Ezra and Nehemiah. I mean, the writing prophets that I've mentioned. I mean, there are historical things in them that need...
Verisimilitude does not make something necessarily historical. Go read, the Bacchae by Euripides. There is some verisimilitude, real cultic kind of representation in this fictive kind of play. Thebes is a real place. There's a lot of very interesting, important elements that you can find that are there. And But we know we're talking about a fiction. Ezra and Nehemiah, God, there's something, there's so much. Nils Peter Lemke wrote something that's really damning about that as a fictive writing. And it sounds like it's written at the end of the Persian early Hellenistic period. Ezra and Nehemiah are found nowhere outside of the Bible. So until we have that data, we cannot be certain they existed or didn't. You start bringing up these prophets and all this other stuff, and that gets into a mess because there's some that seems like you could be questioning a lot of this material. And this guy's not seeming to do that. He's just granting that these things exist. And you can call that hyper-skepticism, but I call it just being cautious when you know you're seeing moralistic propaganda written kind of like it feels like a backdating, telling a kind of moralized history of your people, but not a contemporary written in the time of those events. And when you compare it to the annals of the kings and the various other people, Sargon and other people, like there's so many annals that are contemporaneous specifically with the dates they're claiming the prophets are writing, and they are propaganda in the sense that we went, we took, we this. It's not a moralizing, oh, we broke the covenant and we did wrong in the eyes of the Lord, and so the Lord did and then there's a narrative. Sounds more like a fiction written later, backdating it, acting like it's older.
To be investigated and interpreted.
Well, the book of Isaiah has material that stretches over several centuries,
Of course it
and
does.
it only has the name of one prophet.
Yes, but that's a historical point.
Can I just...
No. I wish, man, these irritate me. Because Francesca's point is Isaiah supposedly wrote all this. Isaiah didn't write all that. There's at least 3 Isaiahs in Isaiah. First, second, and third Isaiah in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah didn't write all that. Somebody fictively in the name of Isaiah is adding material into Isaiah's book. Do you see the problem?
Just moving on from you two, fascinating as it is to hear this historical argument. Rabbi Laura, no Moses, no David, they don't exist. It undermines Judaism.
Well, it doesn't undermine anything as I'm listening to you. I have a completely different take on what fact is and what my approach is to the Bible. That when I look at the Bible, I'm not an archaeologist or historian in that way. I'm looking at it as a teacher, as a theologian, and for me, it has truth. It has truth that changes my life. Yeah. It has truth that I think affects other people's lives. It has things that I love. It has things that I can't stand. And I'm entering that debate. So the fact of what...
Hey, that's cool. I can respect that. There's things I can't stand. This guy right here, he's kind of seems fundamental-ish. But she is willing to say, now there's things I can't stand. The fact that Richard Dawkins is on this panel is going to be interesting.
What was, whether there was Babylonian, whether there was David or Moses. There's lots of information that says, or scholars who say there was Moses and why. Might have been with a slightly different name. But I'm not entering that phrase.
So it doesn't need to be historically true because there is truth in it. There's a greater truth.
A completely different kind of truth.
Yeah. So Richard, I mean, similarly, there are great truths in the Greek fables, aren't there, of mythology. It doesn't need to be true.
Richard's face, his head's on his shoulder like... Oh, shit, here we go again.
For us to derive truth from it.
The world is full of origin myths and creation myths and myths of all kinds, and many of them are very beautiful. But what worries me about the Bible is that it has acquired, in our civilization, an enormous privileged position. I mean, everybody knows something about the Greek myths and the Valhalla myths and so on, and some other myths as well. And they are interesting, and they're treated as interesting myths. But the Bible myths are given a special privileged treatment. I mean, they're regarded as somehow set off on one side, away from all these other myths. No doubt you'll find truths in the other myths. You'll find some truths of that kind in Australian Aboriginal myths.
Yes, but I'm looking for God.
Well, which God? I mean, why not Jupiter? Why not Zeus? Why not Thor?
Yes.
Yeah, baby. Bring it, baby. Bring it.
I think that... Michael, allow me to stay over here just for let hear Richard out. Yeah, go on.
Well, that's about it, really. I mean, I object to the way...
I hope there's more to come from you.
I was simply objecting to the way the Judeo-Christian myth has permeated our society to such an enormous extent, as though somehow it has special truths which are not to be found in other myths. And I don't think there's much truth to be found in any myths, as a matter of fact, but certainly there's no reason why the Judeo-Christian myth should be given this privileged status. And as for it not being literally true, of course, sophisticated theologians and historians don't think it's literally true, but 40%, 45% of the American people believe literally in Adam and Eve, believe literally that the world is only 6,000 years old. I mean, that's a shocking figure, and you can't duck out of it by saying, oh, sophisticated theologians don't believe it. Unfortunately, what sophisticated theologians believe isn't really relevant to what the majority of Christians do believe.
Wow.
Chris.
Damn.
I think, Richard, cue Chris from the Evangelical Alliance, if I may, because you believe it's all true, don't you?
I do, yeah.
So you believe that...
I do. Adam and Eve too.
You know, Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark. You believe, to just take something, Genesis 19:5, 2 angels came to Lot's house in Sodom.
This guy's fingers are like... Look, I suffer from anxiety, I think panic disorders. And I can tell when someone's nervous. Like, I do it to myself and I don't realize I'm picking my fingernails or I'm like scratching. And this guy's fingers are twirling like, oh, I'm on the spot.
And Gomorrah. And he was the only righteous man in the village. And the locals wanted to know the angels. They wanted to homosexually rape the angels. So Lot offered his virgin daughters instead as an appeasement. Sodom and Gomorrah was demolished after that. And his wife...
Look at his fingers go, dude. This guy's really like, oh, man.
Turned into a block of salt.
Turned into a block of salt. Just think about that.
And she looked back.
You
believe that happened?
I take my cues from Jesus, who we've already agreed
So,
is
did
historically
that
accurate.
happen?
I believe that Jesus believed the Old Testament to be historically accurate.
Do you believe that that happened?
I believe it happened because Jesus did.
Oh my gosh. Just think about that. How does that not lead to some, you know, if you just think about it, the more I've distanced myself from the fundamentalist world I came out of, it becomes more obvious the problem we're dealing with that the new atheists are highlighting. And I get it. Maybe there's some, you know, levels in which they should be more lenient to allowing the myths and the humanities and such to play an important role. The art, the experience, the meaning and stuff that we can gain from ancient writers. But when you believe this happened, because Jesus believed this happened, my God, I can marry a 9-year-old because Muhammad married a 9-year-old, and I follow the words of the Prophet Muhammad. This kind of thinking, this kind of belief is really going to have negative outcomes. I can guarantee you that.
I don't think
Nikki,
we know whether Jesus believed it happened or not. And I believe that appalling...
True. I don't know if he... I can't remember if there's a verse specific in the Gospels off the top of my head that he references. I think there is a mention in the epistles, but I'm not sure that there is a pastoral epistles. But I'm not sure there's a mention of him with Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm not sure.
Horrendous, horrific story was talking about obedience to God and various other things. It was not about you know, is it literally true, and you know, should we believe it? And we have absolutely no idea whether.
If he was the most righteous man in the village and he offered his virgin daughters as appeasement, what were the rest like?
Well, appalling.
The most righteous man offered his virgin daughters to these guys to do whatever they want with them. What were the rest of them like, right? Oh.
But you see, it was written about people by men, and they were usually men, with a certain worldview understanding. I mean, if you
what
go
Richard has
through,
identified is there are an awful lot of people in the world who, like Krish, believe it's all true.
Yes, but I think Chris
Yes,
would also say that the most important thing about it, and don't let me put words in your mouth, is that it points to a bigger truth. Yeah. And you say, well, why should the Bible get privileged status? Is because maybe, because the other myths that you were referring to earlier have contained truths that we as human beings all resonate to, but perhaps the Bible, taken, opens a window onto truth that has endured, that we see our own human natures spelled out in the pages of the Bible. We can relate to what's going on, and we find a truth that endures.
It isn't even true that Jesus thought that that story was true. I mean, when Jesus refers to Sodom and Gomorrah, he's talking about the hospitality laws, which are being grossly infringed by the behavior of Lot. So to assume that the story is about homosexuality would just be really quite a false thing.
And he didn't even comment on the fact that the poor daughter was put out instead. You know, I mean, he didn't comment on that, unfortunately.
So what lesson are we supposed to get from that story? What moral lesson?
Well, there's somebody
We're going to
missing
come
in
on
the
to the
story.
moral lessons in a minute. It is a fact,
There's somebody
but
missing.
touch on it now, Richard. What's
Well,
your
we were
question?
just told that what you get from the Bible is moral lessons, and presumably you say this didn't literally happen, but it's telling us something. What is it telling us?
Well, the moral
Okay, so let's
lesson is...
listen to the voice
the moral
that's
lesson
missing
is-
in this story, which is Abraham. Abraham turned to God and argued with God. So the message that I get from this story is
The message that I get from this story, I mean, come on.
argue about it, debate about it, don't accept it as true completely.
Well, why in that case? If you want to convey a message, which is in this case argue about it, why not just say argue about it? Why wrap it up?
Do you want to remember that message?
Bishop Michael, is this not, if I may ask
You
you a
don't
question?
even know what the message is. That's how obscure it is.
Bishop Michael, let me...
The message is hospitality. We know that it's hospitality because Abraham shows hospitality to the three divine figures who come to him, and that is in Greek xenia, right, which is a well-known hospitality myth that goes way, way back into ancient Mesopotamia. Here's the deal, though. He shows hospitality. He's saying Sodom and Gomorrah. He's going down there to see if any are righteous. And, of course, in their custom, it seemed fitting that Lot giving his virgin daughters in a world where men ruled and women were just inferior, you know, that was the message you're going to get in a way, is that he's showing hospitality to strangers, again, xenia, and these other people are treating strangers like shit. This is the message of this story. One is a righteous man. Lot is a righteous man. He preserves Lot and his family, helps them escape. But in all of that, there's a disgusting message, too, in which Lot impregnates his two daughters who get him drunk and all of that. And it's like, how do you, like, you could squeeze this shit to find something that's, like, nice. Treat strangers nice is the message. You didn't have to put the whole incestual stuff in there. But here's the thing. That's in there because that's in all these other myths too. The Greeks had sexual myths like crazy. I mean, if you just take Genesis, from the very beginning with the eating of the tree to knowing good and evil, and then what's the curse? She will have children in pain. So there's a reason to correlate somehow the eating of this fruit with sex in some way. There's that correlation can be made, that interpretation. Immediately, he impregnates Eve. She has children. Now they're having children. And by the way, the curse is based on that, right? Then you go down just a page or two, and here you are in a genealogy of nothing but descendants. And then the sons of God see daughters of men as beautiful. They impregnate them. There's giants and Nephilim, the whole nine. Flood, catastrophe, chaos, sin, absolute bad. God repents of it because Noah has a great sacrifice that smells like barbecue. Noah's seen naked. All of a sudden, nudity, naked, sexual something. And many rabbis and other people have interpreted over time. Did he sleep? Did the son Ham sleep with his mom? There's this interpretation. Did Ham castrate his dad? From Uranus and the Greek myths. There are many interpretations. Then flip it over a few pages. Abraham's pimping out his wife as his sister. Flip it over a page. You get Isaac, who's actually doing the same thing with his wife. Flip it over a page. Jacob ends up sleeping with his daughter-in-law, or is it Judah? No, yeah, Jacob ends up sleeping with his daughter-in-law after his sons die of the curse. One spills a seed on the earth, a sexual innuendo. Then you get to Joseph, and Joseph's fleeing from Potiphar's wife who's trying to take his clothes. There is so much of this throughout the whole book of Genesis, and you go to the Greek myths, you see the same thing. Sorry, I had to give you a recap just to point out. It's mythology like the others are mythology. And if we only learn more about those other stories, we might actually relate and be more, it might be more relevant to us, but we're not taught it because it didn't remain the dominant religion of the world. Christianity ended up conquering coercively, where the other more pagan societies were more coexistent. Whereas Christianity says one truth, one God, one way, the very narrow way, and it forces the other religions to go extinct, in a sense.
Allow me to ask the question, please. Yes. Is this not just classically cherry-picking and taking the bits that you're comfortable with?
You are doing the cherry-picking because you chose the story.
Yes.
You are doing... This guy's a slick dude. You're doing the cherry-picking because you chose a story that's in your book. The book that you're claiming is this sacred, holy text, and... The cherry picking, it's in your book. You should identify and see, how do you deal with that problem?
There are hundreds of more edifying stories in the Bible, but you didn't choose them.
You only chose the shitty stuff that I don't like, that I don't even like, and I can't defend because it's just the way it is.
You're the one who wants to cherry pick.
Let me just say, you must not confuse, as Professor Dawkins does in his books, between the descriptive aspects of the Bible and the prescriptive ones. Mm-hmm. Just because the Bible describes some horrendous incident, it doesn't mean that the Bible approves of it.
Yeah, we understand that, but Lot is seen as righteous, and he impregnates his 2 daughters in an incestual situation, and it doesn't condemn Lot's behavior, it protects Lot, and if anything, makes the daughters look like they're the bad ones for trying to preserve their seed because of the catastrophe that happened with all the fire, thinking that the world had ended and there's no more life. They believed it. That's the story telling you in the Bible. So the girls are doing something noble, thinking they're preserving the bloodline of humanity. Lot is innocent because he's wasted drunk in this situation and impregnates his daughter. What? Or the guy's offering his virgin daughters, like there's no condemnation in this text. And trust me, there's plenty of places to find that example, but this is silly.
The point about Abraham, with all due respect to the rabbi, is not that he argued with God, but that he was asking for mercy for the inhabitants of these cities.
That's true.
Actually, I do agree that Abraham's debating. He's arguing. He's debating. He goes, will the righteous one of the earth not do this? Will the righteous one? And yeah, he may be asking for mercy, but he's still kind of questioning God, right? He's kind of fighting with God.
That is the significant thing. And what Jesus saw as significant about Sodom and Gomorrah was that it was its sin, its wickedness that led to its destruction. That's the lesson to be learned from it.
Yes. Professor Stephen Lowe. What lesson? Sorry, Professor, what am I talking about? Professor Richard, Bishop Dawkins. No, that's most certainly not correct. Sorry, Bishop. Bishop Stephen, what lesson do you get from it?
From that particular story?
Yeah. Sorry to cherry pick, but I thought it was an interesting one to talk about because it's pretty vile. Carry on.
Because there are a whole number, in a sense, as Richard's pointed out, of myths and stories, particularly in the Old Testament. What I found fascinating is we found it quite difficult so far to talk about the New Testament, which for Christians is where we get our inspiration and understanding of the nature and life of Jesus.
We're going to have to come to that in the next episode. This is part 1 of Is the Bible Still Relevant Today? The big questions. We have, look, the 2 on there, Richard Dawkins and Francesca, are the main ones that I have a lot of respect for and I love learning from. So I look forward to picking this up. I've never watched this whole thing. I think I've seen a clip or 2 out of the Francesca saying David didn't exist like we saw earlier at the beginning. I've never watched this all the way through. So, hey, if you enjoy this stuff, subscribe to my reaction channel so that you get notified. Hit that all so that the bell once you subscribe. Like the video, share it out there. I hope that you will stay here and be part of our community. I love to see your comments and recommendations also. So I want to hear from you in the comment section. Until next time, see you then.